Hello everyone, this is Javelin at English Tutor Hub and welcome back to my channel. Today's lesson is about question tags and we're gonna look at the basic rules of question tags. So let's start. Question tags are short questions at the end of the sentence. Alright? So it's very important at the end of the sentence. And we use question tags in spoken English and in informal written English, but mostly in spoken English. So let's look at 3 examples of question tags. She's lovely, isn't she? So this is the question tag. Isn't she in red? And you can see that it comes at the end of the statement or sentence. So here is the sentence. She's lovely. Then a comma. Then we have the question tag. And of course, when we write it, we have to write a question mark. Here is another example. He's kind, isn't he? So again, we have a sentence and then we have a question tag at the end. And here we have example number 3. You're going to Spain tomorrow, aren't you? So we have the sentence and then we have the question tag at the end. Notice that the question tags are all different. Isn't she? Isn't he? Aren't you? So the question tags depends on the form of the sentence. So this form, sentence 1, gives us this question tag. Isn't she? And this form here gives us this question tag. And in sentence 3, and the form here gives us these question tags. And I'll explain these rules in details in this lesson. So keep watching. Now, let's move on to the meaning and use of question tags. The meaning number 1. There are 2 main meanings. Number 1, to check if something is true. An example, here we have the conference and someone says, the conference is at 8 o'clock, isn't it? So we have the statement or the sentence followed by the question tag. And the meaning of this is that the person is checking if this is true. Someone wants to know if the conference starts at 8 o'clock. Alright? The person is checking if it's true that the conference starts at 8 o'clock. And we can also use the question tag simply to ask for agreement. This is number 2. So we're not really asking a question when we do this. We're simply making a statement and we are looking for agreement. We're looking for agreement or someone that will agree with us. Here is an example. It's a beautiful wedding, isn't it? So we're saying it's a beautiful wedding. And then we're saying, do you agree? Alright? We are saying if other people agree. So here in number 1, this is a real question. We really want to know if the conference starts at 8 o'clock. And here in number 2, it's not really a question. We simply making a statement. Yes? When to use question tags? Well, this is very important. The basic rule is, for an affirmative sentence, we use a negative question tag. So it's the opposite. If the sentence, the first part of it is affirmative, then the question tag will be negative. Alright? So here's an example. John can speak French, isn't he? So here is the sentence, and notice this is affirmative. This is a positive sentence. John can speak French. But when we use the question tag, the tag is in the negative. Isn't he? Okay? So we have put the verb here. We have put the verb here, isn't. This is in the negative. Another example. They want to watch tennis match, don't they? So, they want to watch tennis match. This is different. This is affirmative, and don't they, this is the negative. You don't worry, I'm gonna explain the form of this in this lesson, and the opposite is true. For a negative sentence, we use the affirmative question tag. So if the first part of the sentence is negative, then the end of the question is affirmative. Example, John can't speak French, is he? So negative sentence, and we have a or we have an affirmative question tag. Is he? Next, they don't want to watch tennis match, do they? And here is the affirmative question tag, do they? Alright, so it's always this part, it's always a sentence, alright, or a statement, and then we use the question tag. Okay. When not to use question tags. We do not use question tags at the end of a question. Alright? Remember, I showed you that with a question tag at the end of a sentence or a statement, but not at the end of a question. Here is an example, a mistake. Is the museum open today? Isn't it? No, this is wrong. This is nonsense, okay? This is not correct because this is not correct because this in green, this is already a question. Is the museum open today? So a big no. Weren't they doing their homework? Were they? It's also a big no. We can say were they at the end because this is a question. Weren't they doing their homework? Alright? This is already a question. So we couldn't write a question tag at the end of a question. Alright? Now, let's look at the form. There are 4 rules for the form of question. So here, we're gonna look at auxiliary verbs. We're gonna look at auxiliary verbs. So, if the sentence, so the first part has an auxiliary verb, or if the sentence, so the first part, if the first part of the sentence has an auxiliary verb, then we repeat it in the question tag. So we repeat the question tag. We repeat the auxiliary verb in the question tag. So first, let's look at affirmative sentences with a negative question tag. Example here. So affirmative sentences and with a negative question tag. AB can play the piano. Can't she? So AB can play the piano. So this is an auxiliary verb, or is in fact a modal verb. An auxiliary verb in the affirmative, and so we repeat the same auxiliary verb in the question tag. Can she? So a modal verb can, and we repeat it in the question tag, negative. Can she? Alright? So again, we repeat the same auxiliary verb in the question tag. And of course, we transform it into a negative. AB can play the piano. Can she? So we transform the affirmative auxiliary verb, or in a modal verb in fact, into a negative question tag. AB can play the piano. Can she? Number 2 example. I should invite them. Shouldn't I? So should is the auxiliary verb. So we repeat it in the question tag. And if it's affirmative here, we put it in the negative. Shouldn't I? Okay. Now, let's look at in the negative affirmative. Mr. Cruz hasn't finished his painting. Has he? So this is in present perfect. Hasn't finished, and hasn't is the auxiliary, and hasn't is the auxiliary, has in the, hasn't is the auxiliary, has in the negative. So in the question tag, we repeat it and we make it in the affirmative. Hasn't becomes has. Alright? Next, Carl wasn't playing football in the garden. Was he? So this is the verb as an auxiliary verb, and it's in the past tense of the verb be as an auxiliary verb. Wasn't in the negative, and so we repeat it in the affirmative. Was he? Carl wasn't playing football in the garden. Was he? So the form of the question tag is, well, we repeat, or we have the verb first, and then we have the subject afterwards. So this is the question tag, verb first and then the subject afterwards. we have the verb and then subject. Verb and then the subject. Alright? Form rule number 2. Be as a main verb. Let's look at verb be as a main verb, not an auxiliary verb, but as a main verb. And again, if the sentence has be as a main verb, we repeat it in the question tag. For example, from affirmative to negative. John is kind, isn't he? So we have a verb be, and so we repeat it in the question tag and we put it in the negative. Isn't he? The play was good, wasn't it? Alright? And let's look at the negative. Negative to affirmative. He isn't from Spain, is he? So we have the verb be in the negative. He isn't. And then we have it in the affirmative, in the question tag. Is he? Again, we have the verb. We have the verb is followed by the subject he, because it is a question. We aren't late, are we? So we have the verb be in the negative, aren't, and then we have it in the affirmative in the question tag. Are we? Form use number 3. No auxiliary verb in the present simple. If the sentence has no auxiliary verb and is in the present simple, the question tag uses do. For example, affirmative to negative. You bake a cake, don't you? So we have a verb, bake, which does not have an auxiliary verb. So this is a main verb, bake, and it is in the present simple. And bake, we replace it with do, and of course we put this in the negative, so it becomes don't. You bake a cake, don't you? Pat likes to sing, doesn't he? Alright, so this is probably the most complicated, the most difficult to understand or to remember. So if you have a verb with no auxiliary verb and it's in the present simple, then we replace it with the verb do in the correct form. And the third person singular of the verb is, the third person of the verb singular is does. And we put it in the negative doesn't, followed by a subject. Alright? So I advise you to really read, learn, and understand this. Now let's look at the negative. Negative to affirmative. You don't speak English, do you? Here we have the present simple in the negative. You don't speak English. And the question tag has the verb do. The question tag has the verb do. Don't becomes do. Number 2 example. Helen doesn't play the piano, does she? So we have the negative of the present simple of the verb. The present simple of the verb play. Helen doesn't play the piano, does she? Alright, So question tag has the verb do in the third person singular. And in fact, this case, these two sentences, negative to affirmative of the present simple, has no auxiliary verb. In fact, it also follows rule number 1. If the sentence has an auxiliary verb, we repeat it in the question tag. Alright? And finally, rule number 4. No auxiliary verb in the past simple. If the sentence has no auxiliary verb and is in the past simple, the question tag uses did. For example, affirmative to negative. He studied in Philippines. Didn't he? Here we have studied, and this is the past simple of study, and no auxiliary verb. So in the question tag, we use did. Didn't he? And this is in the negative, because this is the affirmative. Alright? Grace mopped the floor yesterday. Didn't she? And now let's look at the negative. Negative to affirmative. Mr. Smith didn't come to the wedding, did he? So, didn't come, this is the past simple in the negative. So, this is negative of the past simple, didn't come. And then the question tag uses did. So, negative, affirmative. Pam didn't want to go shopping, did she? So again, didn't want. Didn't want is the negative form of the past simple, negative to affirmative. Did she? Alright? And again, this actually also follows rule number 1, because did, didn't is also in fact an auxiliary verb. Alright? So there you are, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Visit official website of English Tutor Hub, www.englishtutorhub.com, for a complete transcript of this lesson. And here are some videos which I recommend for you. Simply click the video and it will start. Don't forget to subscribe, share, click the thumbs up button, and let me know your thoughts and questions. Love to hear from you. This is Javelin. Thank you very much.